right, so welcome to Greek, and this is the Master Personal Ending Chart. I want to go over this and just make sure that you have a clear sense of where I'm coming from as I introduce the personal endings of the Greek verbal system. And what we have here is a chart with 4 quadrants, okay? And they are divided up by, well, if you are reading across from left to right, active voice, left and right side. And if you're reading down, we're doing primary tenses, top to bottom, and secondary tenses on the right side, top to bottom. All right? And we'll talk about what that means here in just a moment. What I want to do is review the primary tenses for the personal endings here. For the Mounts textbook, Chapter 15 gives you a generic introduction to verbs. Chapter 16 introduces you to the present active indicative. You learn contract verbs in Chapter 17. Then you learn the present middle passive forms in 18, right? And those are the forms that are the primary tenses. And primary is simply non-past. And what we're dealing with here are the 2 left columns. So you can only see the top left column. I'm sorry, the 2 quadrants on the left side. Now, what I'm not sure about is as you've gone through your first semester of Greek with other professors, how you learn the personal endings. Personal endings are those endings that are inflectional. They mark the person and the number of the subject. So we have first singular, second singular, third singular for I, you, and he, she, or it, right? First plural, second plural, third plural for we, you, all, or y'all, and they. Did you learn your personal endings with the connecting vowels, or did you learn them just as the endings themselves?
Just the endings.
Okay, so you focus just on the ending. Very good. Did you learn the real endings, and then look at the resultant endings? Yes.
I would say we looked at them, but I wouldn't say I memorized them.
Okay. Well, what I've asked my students to do, and I will ask you to do it, is to memorize the real endings and put those in parentheses next to the resultant endings, which are the ones you're going to see for the most part in your forms. And I have a reason for doing this. When we get to the later chapters and start learning some of the other verb forms, the me forms, you're going to see these reappearing. And they won't seem so strange to you. A lot of people think of the me verbs as really radically different and irregular. The fact of the matter is they're not. They're actually following an older pattern, okay? But the reason I teach my students the real endings is because I want you to see the similarities among all of the personal endings in all 4 of the charts, okay? So the real first-person singular ending is me, and it just happens not to be used in most of the verbs that you're learning. The verbs that we've learned are often referred to as the omega verbs because their first-person singular form has an omega at the end, luo, right? Agapo, and so forth. You see an omega. Whereas verbs like a me in the first person singular, that's a me verb. It ends with me in the first person singular. So you've already seen this real ending stuck on a form that hasn't changed a whole lot in the Greek language, a me. And it's so irregular, right? And as a matter of just historical linguistics, your most irregular forms are the ones that are used most frequently, and they tend to freeze by virtue of being used so frequently that they never get a chance to become standardized and made normal. Okay. Anyhow, so me is our real ending. It's not used in the verbs that are omega verbs, and so what ends up happening is the omicron, which is the connecting vowel, is left with no ending, and so it will compensatorily lengthen and become an omega, all right, due to that non-use of the personal ending. And that's why we have forms like luo. Lues actually comes from, the real personal ending is C, and the resultant ending is the sigma here, where one of the things that happens in Greek is that when you have a sigma between 2 vowels, does anybody know what happens to it? Okay, what did you learn happens to the sigma?
It goes into space.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yes. I like to describe it as the sigma falls into Hades or Sheol. Okay? So,
No, ours went the other way.
yes, yes. Well, some people are heavenly minded and some are not, right?
Like it's lustful.
Yeah, there you go. So for me, the sigma falls out, or it falls into Sheol, and it's gone. But then it's reattached at the back. No one knows exactly why that is, unless it's analogy from the secondary tenses, and possibly in order to differentiate it from the third-person singular form. Lue really comes from luati, where the T ending's used. But what we've discovered in the study of Greek is that final tau iota switches to sigma iota, and then the intervocalic sigma falls out, and we're left with lue. Okay? So the first three forms do end up looking rather different than what the real personal endings are. And you're going to see them so frequently that it won't be too hard for you to remember those forms anyway. But just, I want you to think me-ct as the real endings. Okay? Me-ct. Because when you get to the middle passives, what do you have? Well, you have the same me-ct for the first three, except you're sticking an alpha in between those two consonants that you learned in the active, right? Me-ct becomes my-si-tai. All right? So then the plural forms, of course, are men and te, which don't undergo any changes. They're perfectly happy connecting to the vowels. So lua men, lua te. But then we have lu usi. And the real ending was nti. Nti. So what happens here? Well, final tau iota becomes what? Becomes sigma iota, right? And then where did this stuff come from if nu sigma iota is what I'm going to see once that tau iota becomes sigma iota? What's happened there? That's right. It would have been something like this, not an omicron. It would have been something like lu on C, right? And another thing that happens is that dental consonants and nu, when you think about the letter nu, is nu a dental consonant? What makes something a dental consonant? Yeah, the tongue touches the back of the front teeth. T, d, 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 th, 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 right, theta. But then nu, n, 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 your tongue is in the same place that the tau and the delta are pronounced, right? So the nu is a nasal dental. And all dentals before sigmas do what? They drop out, or they fall into Sheol, or Hades. And when that nu disappears, we get compensatory lengthening, okay? Now, what kind of compensatory lengthening do we see in Greek? One of the things is that a vowel that's short can become its longer counterpart, but sometimes a short vowel that needs to compensatorily lengthen becomes a diphthong. And diphthongs are inherently long, okay? So you'll frequently see diphthongs emerging to replace just a short vowel. And so that's where the u comes from in lu usi instead of lu onsi, okay? So that's those are our forms. Over here on the middle passive side, again, we've talked about the my, si, tai endings. The second person singular form is the only one that is particularly difficult. So what did we have? We had something like lu, si. All right? So what happened here? What happened to my sigma?
Went to Sheol.
Yes, it went to Sheol. We've got intervocalic sigma drops out, and then what's going to happen next?
Links to an A
Okay, we've got vowel contraction. And here you have to remember that there are some situations where epsilon meets an alpha, and where alpha meets an epsilon. And I think Mounts refers to this as the who got there first rule. Okay? Whichever one of these gets there first becomes the long counterpart of the vowel. So if the epsilon gets there before the eta, this will contract to a I'm sorry, but if epsilon gets there before an alpha, it becomes an eta. If an alpha gets there before the epsilon, then it becomes a long alpha, which looks just like a short alpha, amazingly. Okay? So what situation do we have here? We have epsilon and alpha coming together. So we get this eta, and then this iota is hanging out on the boundaries. What's it going to do? It's going to subscript under the long vowel. That's the result of the contraction. And so that's why we get lue. Lue. All right. And then the final three forms are metha for we, se for y'all, and tai, Gesundheit, for the third plural, they. All right, and there's no phonetic changes that happen here. Everything's happy connecting with these vowels, and so everything looks normal here except the second person singular form. All right.